Okay, so today we're diving into a story. Um, it's a story about a relationship gone wrong, but it's also about so much more than that. It's a story about manipulation, about how easily things can spiral out of control. We're working with a firsthand account from a young woman we'll call Sarah, and she's navigating, an unexpected pregnancy while getting tangled up with this guy named Bumpy.
What I find really fascinating about this story is how it just slowly peels back the layers of this relationship. And you start off and it seems pretty normal, but then it quickly descends into this web of control and manipulation.
Yeah, right from the start, you see these subtle hints of trouble. So they meet at a food stand. Sarah is stressed from juggling work and school, and her laptop crashes. And Bumpy just swoops in, offers his laptop like this, knight in shining armor.
It's almost like that classic fairy tale beginning gone wrong. And that's where the manipulation often begins.
Right.
He creates this instant feeling of obligation. He insists on walking her to her gate, insists on getting her number, even though she's like, oh, you can just knock on my door later. But he's already showing that desire to kind of control the situation.
And it's interesting because the communication starts off pretty casual. Lots of memes, lighthearted chats. He mentions he has a daughter, paints himself as this devoted dad. Then when Sarah needs support at the clinic for her pregnancy, he's right there, comforting, caring. And you can see how someone would start to depend on him.
Absolutely. And I think that's a common tactic we see in a lot of these types of relationships. This initial period of intense support, sometimes called love bombing. And it can create a really strong emotional bond, which makes the person more vulnerable to being manipulated later on.
Yeah, it makes sense. And I think it can happen to anyone. You're vulnerable, you're going through something difficult, and someone comes in and they seem like they have all the answers.
Exactly. And it can be hard to see the red flags when you're caught up in that whirlwind.
So how do things start to shift from this, seemingly supportive dynamic to something more problematic?
Well, as they start officially dating, Bumpy's demands on Sarah's time really start to increase.
Okay, so like what kind of demands are we talking about here?
Well, first, weekends are totally off limits because of his daughter.
Yeah.
Then even visits become impossible. And then there are these really strange communication restrictions.
Like what?
Sarah isn't allowed to call or even text him during these times. It's somehow disrespectful to his daughter. It's like he's slowly isolating her from her support system.
Wow, yeah, that's a huge red flag. It's one thing to, want to spend time with your child, but to completely cut off your partner from communication, that's definitely not healthy.
Exactly. It's a classic isolation tactic. And he's doing it all under the guise of being a good father.
Right, which makes it even harder to see what's really going on. So at this point, Sarah is starting to feel isolated. And then we get hit with the baby mama drama. Bumpy's ex starts texting Sarah, accusing her of interfering in their relationship. Sarah tries to talk to Bumpy about it, but he just dismisses her concerns, calls his ex dramatic.
This is textbook gaslighting. He's invalidating Sarah's feelings, shifting the blame, making it seem like she's the problem.
Yeah, I think we've all been in situations where someone made us question our own version of events. That feeling of confusion and self-doubt, it's so powerful.
Absolutely. And gaslighting can be incredibly effective, especially when it comes from someone you trust.
So Sarah ends up believing Bumpy over his ex. The conflict with the baby mama continues, the tension builds, and they eventually break up. You'd think that would be the end of it, right?
You would think so.
Uh-huh.
But this is where the cycle of abuse often kicks in. There's this tension building. An incident occurs, followed by apologies and a period of calm that lures the victim back in.
Oh, wow. I can see how that would be so difficult to break free from. So did they get back together?
They did. They bump into each other. Bumpy apologizes, admits he was wrong, woos her back with dinner, and they rekindle the relationship.
It's like that honeymoon phase all over again.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It gives a false sense of security, making it harder to recognize the abuse that's still present.
And the abuse is still there, right?
Oh, absolutely.
What happened?
Well, Sarah checks his phone, and she discovers messages and photos from other women.
Seriously, I mean, how many red flags can one relationship have?
It's unbelievable.
You're right.
But the discovery of infidelity can be a turning point. It forces the victim to confront the reality of the situation.
So what does Sarah do?
She confronts him, of course, demands he delete everything. And he pretends to comply. 2 weeks later, he's right back to talking to these women.
No way. What's his excuse this time?
Oh, he says he was looking for his next person because he thought their relationship was over.
Wow. No accountability whatsoever.
It's classic blame shifting, refusing to take responsibility for his actions.
It's like he's trying to rewrite history.
Exactly. He's putting the responsibility on Sarah. It's a way of maintaining control and avoiding consequences.
It's infuriating. So at this point, Sarah is dealing with the infidelity,
Yeah.
the manipulation, and then her mom gets involved, right?
Right. Her mom was initially wary of Bumpy, even confronted him at his house, which led to more drama with Bumpy's mother.
Oh, man. So now the families are getting involved.
It adds a whole other layer to the power dynamics. Bumpy's mother seemed to share his controlling tendencies, judging Sarah and her mother based on their family structure.
This gets more and more complicated.
It's a reminder that abuse can be perpetuated by a network of enablers.
So this conflict with the mothers pushes Sarah to make a big decision. She moves out of her mom's place and into a bedsitter.
It seems like she's trying to create some distance. But of course, Bumpy pulls her right back in.
And this is where the whole second wife concept gets introduced.
This is where the manipulation and control become truly evident.
Let's talk about this second wife situation because it's pretty shocking.
Okay, so Bumpy argues that since his mother dislikes Sarah, he needs to find a first wife that his mother will approve of. Sarah would then be the second wife, living with them but never officially acknowledged by his family.
That's unbelievable.
It's an outrageous proposition that completely disregards Sarah's feelings and autonomy.
And what's even crazier is that Sarah actually considers it.
She's torn between the fear of losing him and the struggle to navigate this incredibly complex situation.
So how does Bumpy try to solve this problem he created?
He proposes a solution to help Sarah understand this second wife dynamic. Threesomes.
He's suggesting threesomes as a way to understand being a second wife.
Exactly.
I don't even know what to say to that.
It's a whole new level of disturbing. He's trying to normalize his desire for multiple partners while manipulating Sarah into accepting his terms.
And does Sarah go along with this?
She does, desperate to please him and save the relationship. She actually tries to find women for these threesomes, even changes her Tinder bio to reflect that.
That's heartbreaking.
It raises an important question for our listeners. Why would someone comply with such demands? Well, later in Sarah's account, she reveals that Bumpy constantly reinforced the idea that she wouldn't understand relationships or submission because she was raised by a single mother.
Oh, wow. So he's using her upbringing against her.
Exactly. He's using it as a tool to undermine her confidence.
He's basically training her to submit to his will.
Exactly. Making his perspective seem like the only valid one.
And it works. Sarah goes along with the threesomes even though she feels increasingly uncomfortable and violated each time.
And Bumpy even starts taking over the arrangements, using her phone to contact women and plan the encounters.
He's not even pretending to care about her feelings or consent anymore.
He's treating her like an object for his own gratification.
This is just the tip of the iceberg. The story takes even more twists and turns as they move in together, but we'll have to save those details for part 2 of our deep dive. Stay tuned because it only gets more intense from here.
Oh, it definitely does.
Yeah.
When we left off, Sarah had made the decision to move in with Bumpy. And, moving in together is something a lot of couples do. But in this case, it seems like it just gives Bumpy more opportunity to exert control.
Yeah, and it doesn't take long for things to escalate again. Shortly after moving in, Sarah discovers she's pregnant. And remember, she's still so young, navigating this relationship that's already chaotic and confusing.
Absolutely.
Right.
A pregnancy can add a whole new layer of vulnerability and often intensify those power dynamics within a relationship that's already unhealthy.
So how did this news impact their dynamic?
Well, definitely doesn't bring them closer. Seems to push them further apart in some ways.
Interesting. And what about the families? How does the pregnancy change things with them?
Well, Sarah's mom, who was initially so against Bumpy, actually softens her stance a bit.
Really?
Yeah, maybe she sees the pregnancy as a chance for them to finally settle down, Or maybe it's just that maternal instinct to protect her daughter and grandchild.
Right. I can see that.
It's a natural reaction for family members to rally around the expectant mother, hoping for the best even when there are red flags present.
And it's not just Sarah's mom, right? What about Bumpy's mom?
Well, she does a complete 180 as well. She goes from being cold and judgmental towards Sarah to being friendly and supportive, even sending her on errands.
Wow. So it's like she's finally accepting Sarah as part of the family, even though that whole second wife thing is still hanging over their heads.
Right. It's a sudden change in behavior. It makes you wonder, is it genuine or is it a calculated move to further isolate Sarah from her own support network?
It's hard to say for sure, but for a while things seem to calm down a bit. Sarah describes her pregnancy as beautiful. No morning sickness, no crazy cravings. She's working, preparing for the baby, trying to create some sense of normalcy in this situation that's anything but normal.
It's that classic calm before the storm. That temporary reprieve that we often see in these types of relationships.
And the storm hits right.
It does, and it hits hard.
What happens?
Well, Sarah tells Bumpy that she's feeling uncomfortable and less interested in intimacy because of the pregnancy.
Okay, that's understandable.
Completely. But his response is shocking. He suggests that she find him another woman to be intimate with during her final months of pregnancy because he has needs.
He's serious.
He is. He's completely disregarding her physical and emotional state, prioritizing his own desires above everything else.
I don't even know what to say to that.
It's mind-blowing. This level of selfishness and entitlement is a major red flag.
So what does Sarah do?
Well, she's understandably shocked, but she tries to brush it off, thinks maybe he's just joking. But a few days later, he brings it up again, making it clear that he's dead serious.
It's scary to think about what she must be going through.
Absolutely. It's a chilling example of how abusers normalize these types of demands. They test boundaries, gauge reactions, and slowly chip away at the victim's resistance, making the unthinkable seem almost acceptable.
And things get even more disturbing, right? That woman Sarah found for a threesome, the one she thought she could control, she comes back into the picture.
She does. She wants to visit Sarah and Bumpy. Sarah tells her they're not doing threesomes anymore, but this woman insists on coming over, claiming she wants to help.
Okay. But what happens next really reveals Bumpy's intentions. Sarah comes home, and she finds them all over each other. They don't even seem bothered that she's walked in.
It's just a blatant display of disrespect and a complete violation of the boundaries Sarah tried to set.
So how does Sarah react?
She's devastated. She confronts Bumpy, reminding him that they agreed to stop the threesomes and focus on their family. But as usual, he justifies his actions, blames the other woman for being sexy and tempting him.
He's never willing to take responsibility, is he?
Never. It's all about shifting blame, avoiding accountability.
What happens next?
Well, Sarah, heartbroken and furious, locks herself in the bedroom. But the other woman is still there the next morning.
Oh, wow.
Sarah's forced to go to work, leaving them in her own home.
I can't imagine the emotional turmoil she must be experiencing.
It's just awful. She's pregnant, betrayed by her partner, and now forced to share her home with the woman he cheated with.
And when Sarah gets home from work, the other woman is still there. Bumpy tells her to stay the night. And Sarah, reaching her breaking point, demands that she leave.
It's a small but significant act of defiance. She's standing up for herself, demanding respect, setting boundaries.
But how does Bumpy react to this?
Violently. He slaps Sarah, not once, but twice, right in front of the other woman.
Oh my God.
It's a terrifying escalation of the abuse.
Yeah.
And the fact that he does it in front of another person just demonstrates this complete lack of respect for her.
So what happens to the other woman?
She leaves, thankfully, but the damage is done.
Sarah's left to deal with the aftermath of Bumpy's abuse.
This incident really marks a turning point in the cycle of abuse. The tension has escalated to physical violence. And sadly, we know this won't be the last time.
So the cycle continues.
It does.
What happens next?
Bumpy, realizing the gravity of his actions, becomes remorseful, showers Sarah with affection, promises that it will never happen again. It's almost like he's trying to erase the trauma he inflicted.
That's so manipulative.
It is. It's what we call the honeymoon phase of the cycle of abuse.
Right, that period of intense apologies and promises of change.
Exactly. It's designed to make the victim stay.
But is Sarah falling for it this time?
It seems like she isn't. She's starting to see through his act.
How so?
Well, one evening, while using his laptop, she stumbles upon something shocking. Bumpy's been communicating with another woman. And this woman is pregnant with his child.
You're kidding.
I'm not. It's a complete betrayal. He's been living a lie this whole time.
So what does Sarah do?
She confronts him, of course, demands an explanation.
And what does he say?
He claims that he was just being a father figure to this pregnant woman.
A father figure.
That's his excuse.
That's ridiculous.
It is. It reveals how deeply entrenched he is in this web of deceit.
Sarah doesn't believe him.
Not for a second. Her anger and frustration reach a boiling point. And Bumpy, in a fit of rage, punches a mirror, injuring himself.
He punches a mirror.
He does.
And what does Sarah do?
She just observes the damage he's caused, emotionally numb at this point.
It's like she's completely shut down.
It's a sign of the toll this abuse has taken on her. She's exhausted, drained of the energy to fight or react.
It's heartbreaking.
It is. But then we see a glimmer of hope. Bumpy, sensing Sarah's emotional withdrawal, tries to guilt trip her for not checking on him after he left.
But Sarah stands her ground for the first time. She states that she'd rather be alone than endure his abuse any longer.
It's like she's finally finding her voice.
She is. She's drawing a line in the sand, setting a boundary.
But it's not over yet, right? Sadly, no. The story takes another turn. As Sarah approaches her due date, Bumpy, worried about losing control over her, enlists the help of the other woman, the one he cheated with, asking her to talk to Sarah and fix the situation.
He's still trying to manipulate this situation.
He is. He's desperate to maintain control.
So does this other woman go see Sarah?
She does. And she tries to have a heart-to-heart with her. Initially, Sarah is angry, calling her out for her role in Bumpy's betrayal.
It's good that she's expressing her anger.
It is. It's an important step for her.
But then what happened?
Well, the conversation takes an unexpected turn. The other woman claims that Bumpy lied to her, telling her that Sarah was okay with the threesomes.
And what does Sarah say to that?
She reveals the underlying reason why she tolerated Bumpy's behavior for so long.
This is where we see the impact of societal expectations and gender roles.
Exactly. It's a powerful reminder of how deeply these beliefs can be ingrained.
What does Sarah say?
She explains that Bumpy constantly told her that because she was raised by a single mother, she wouldn't understand how a real household works or what true submission meant in a relationship.
He was using her upbringing against her.
Exactly. Chipping away at her confidence and justifying his controlling behavior.
That's awful.
It is. And sadly, it worked. Sarah started to doubt herself. She silenced her own instincts, questioned her own judgment, and gave in to his demands because she believed that's what a woman in her position was supposed to do.
It's a stark reminder of how powerful these societal narratives can be, especially when reinforced by someone you trust.
Absolutely. It highlights the insidious nature of emotional abuse, how it operates under the radar, slowly eroding the victim's sense of self-worth.
So Sarah, now about to become a mother herself, is starting to see the extent of the damage Bumpy has caused.
It's a powerful moment of awakening. She's breaking free from those beliefs that were imposed on her, reclaiming her own power.
But even as Sarah prepares to give birth, Bumpy doesn't stop his manipulation.
He's terrified of losing control, and he'll do whatever it takes to hold on to her, even if it means resorting to more lies and deceit.
We'll delve into those final manipulations and Sarah's path towards reclaiming her life in the final part of our deep dive.
We're back and picking up Sarah's story right where we left off. She's about to give birth and facing the reality of just how deep Bumpy's manipulation runs.
It's in this last part of her story that we really see things start to shift for her, like a real turning point.
The impending birth of her child seems to be a catalyst. There's this sense of clarity, this determination to break free, not just for herself, but for her child's sake as well.
Like becoming a mother ignites this protective instinct. And Bumpy, perhaps sensing that he's losing his grip, he almost tries to be that man Sarah first met.
It does seem like a last-ditch effort to regain some control. He knows she's vulnerable, right? Exhausted from the pregnancy, about to face the challenges of being a new mom, probably just craving some kind of stability.
Right, and it's like she's aware of this. She talks about just going through the motions, following his lead without really engaging.
It's a survival mechanism, protecting herself, shielding herself from more hurt.
And then there's this moment that shows how desperate Bumpy has become. He reaches out to that other woman, the one from the threesome, asks her to intervene.
Wow. So he can't get to Sarah himself. He's trying to use someone else to do his dirty work.
Exactly.
It really makes you think about this other woman's role. Is she being manipulated too, or is she knowingly complicit in all of this?
That's a good question. So this woman, she goes to their house while Bumpy's out and tries to talk to Sarah.
And how's that go?
Well, at first Sarah's angry. I mean, understandably so. She calls the woman out for her part and everything.
It's good that she's expressing that anger, not holding it in.
Right. It's like she's finally confronting the hurt she's been carrying.
That's a step forward.
But then things take an unexpected turn. The other woman, she claims that Bumpy lied to her, told her that Sarah was totally fine with the threesomes. And Sarah, in this moment of vulnerability, she explains why she put up with Bumpy's behavior for so long.
This is where we see the impact of those societal expectations again, how deeply ingrained those gender roles can be.
Yeah, Sarah explains that Bumpy always used her upbringing against her, saying that because she was raised by a single mother, she wouldn't understand a real relationship or what real submission meant.
He was using her past to justify his control.
And it worked. She started doubting herself, silencing her own instincts, believing that she was supposed to give in to his demands.
It's heartbreaking to see how those societal narratives can be used against someone, especially by someone they trust.
It's like emotional abuse operating under the radar.
Slowly chipping away at her sense of self-worth.
And as Sarah gets ready to give birth, alone and feeling so disillusioned, she finally sees the extent of the damage Bumpy has caused. Not just his actions, but his words.
It's a powerful moment of realization. She's starting to reclaim her own power, stepping outside those beliefs that were forced on her.
And Sarah's story doesn't end there. She gives birth 3 weeks early. It's a difficult experience. Bumpy is there, but she describes herself as emotionally detached.
She's built up that wall, protecting herself and her baby.
And as she navigates those first few days of motherhood, she makes a decision.
What's that?
She chooses to leave Bumpy, to break free from the cycle of abuse.
It's not always easy to walk away from something like that.
No, it isn't, but she does it for herself and for her child.
It's a powerful message for anyone who might be in a similar situation. There is hope, there is help, and a path towards healing.
Sarah's story doesn't have a fairy tale ending, but it's a real and honest look at what an abusive relationship can look like. It reminds us that manipulation can be so subtle. Control can be disguised as love.
And those societal expectations can be weaponized against us.
But her story also shows the power of self-awareness, the importance of setting boundaries, and the resilience of the human spirit.
Recognizing those signs of abuse is crucial. Trust your gut instincts. Speak up when something feels wrong, and seek support when you need it.
You deserve to be in relationships built on respect, trust, and equality. Sarah's experience has been both heartbreaking and eye-opening. I think it reminds us that we need to be more aware, more compassionate, and more willing to challenge the systems and beliefs that allow these harmful behaviors to continue.
And if you're out there listening and you're feeling lost or trapped, please know that you are not alone. There are resources, there are people who understand, and there is a path towards healing.
Sarah's journey is proof of that. By sharing her story, she's breaking the silence, challenging the stigma, and offering hope to others who might be struggling.
Our voices matter. Our stories have the power to change things.
Even in the darkest of times, there is always hope for a brighter tomorrow.